Hello, my name is John Sherin. Welcome to Spotlight Special. This afternoon we have with us a number of people who I think you're going to enjoy meeting and listening to as we talk among ourselves here on a subject that concerns each one of us in Islip and in Suffolk County. As a matter of fact, it concerns all of us living in this country. H.G. Wells once said that human history is more and more becoming a race between education and catastrophe. This afternoon, I think we're either going to engage in the race and watch a catastrophe, or we're going to talk about some kind of changes in the future of education, as at least we see it. On my right, Dr. Mary Anne Raywid, who is presently the director for the Center for the Study of Alternatives at Hofstra University. I hope I said that right. And sitting next to Dr. Raywid, Judith Pietsch, who has recently graduated from an alternative school, something we'll get to know a little bit about here today, called the Maslow-Toffler School of Futuristic Education in Brentwood, and is preparing to enter a university in the fall, and Judy can tell us something about that in a few moments. And at Judy's right is John Baum, who will this year be a student in that alternative school, the Maslow-Toffler School. So let me open things up and perhaps start with you, Dr. Raywid, and ask you, maybe you might define for us a word that I used a moment ago in describing a particular kind of education. I used the word alternative. I'd like to ask you to define that for us. What is alternative education? But before asking you to do that, let me say this. There are people who are saying that education at the moment public education that is in dire straits, that we are literally facing catastrophes in our cities, what with the many problems that there are presently no solutions to. A lot of lip service is being given to alternatives. What do we mean by alternatives, and how would you define them?
Well, I think it's a good place to start because there's a lot of confusion about what alternatives are, since it's one of those terms that everybody pretty much defines for himself. You run into some people who will say, an alternative school has got to be a place where everybody participates in all the decisions, that's what defines an alternative. Somebody else will see it quite differently. So the way perhaps it might be most useful for us to talk about it here today, is just as a system within a district whereby the schools provide a number of different options among which students and their parents can choose. Now, if that sounds to some people like something we've always had, as you and I know, it really is not. Schools in this country have operated on a one best way kind of principle, where we've assumed that there is, or we will eventually discover there to be, one best way to educate everybody. An alternative system assumes, though, that there isn't, and that we need different kinds of programs for different kinds of youngsters.
Let me interrupt you for a minute. A thought occurs to me. I would imagine that a lot of the people watching in might at this point be reacting something like, oh, here we go again, more money. We're presently up to our ears in spiraling school district taxes and so on. Wouldn't this mean a great deal more expenditure? What about money and alternative education? Is it more expensive or less expensive?
Not necessarily at all, and this is one of the things that upset me a bit about the recent CBS series, where somebody got on and said alternative education is more expensive. It is not necessarily, and I think a great many districts throughout the country operate alternative schools on exactly the same per pupil cost basis as the standard schools are operated within the district. Although there are frequently in alternative schools a higher ratio of adults to students, not all of these adults are teachers. A number of arrangements provide for interns, a number provide for all kinds of community resource people, and aides, including peer teaching, which I think you have some of. So that although it is labor intensive, this doesn't necessarily mean that the costs are greater. There's another thing too that's very important in terms of cost, and that is that alternative schools incline not to put as much store by equipment and facilities as conventional schools, so that it does not, many alternative schools are run in buildings that simply don't call for nearly as elaborate a set of equipment as conventional programs.
I think in our school it cost less. It cost the community less money because we purchased our own books, and we had fundraising committee that raised funds, and we had car washes and plays and things that the sources, like from the plays, we all made our own costumes, and it didn't cost anybody any money. And then we had the money from the tickets coming in, so we had our own funds in the school.
You know, one of the things that occurs to me too, Henry Ford once, when asked what colors his cars came in, once said you could have any color you want as long as it's black. And I think that applies to conventional schools in great measure. When we say we have free public education, you can have any kind you want in many districts as long as it's the only kind that's available. It makes a great deal of sense to me personally to increase the options as long as it's not going to increase the cost to any great degree. What about your experience, John, this year? Was there something that for you, you've made a decision to come back for another year, so you must have gleaned something from the year, taken something from the year that says that this particular alternative approach, at least, has something to offer you that you didn't find elsewhere.
I think there were many things that happened this year. I think they were very important, but the thing was that, most importantly, was it took me out of the school and into the community, using the facilities and the resources that are open to students and teachers in the community. It was like, as opposed to being isolated and not using all that you could, it was using resources and things in me and things that I never knew I could use to their best advantage. There are options for my talents that were able to come out this year, and to find things in the community and in the world outside where I will be going. All students do, graduate and move on. To use these things that we'll have to use, and they're there for schools. They're there for people to use, and I think one of the big things was that this was open. This opening was shown to me, and of course, I think it's necessary to use what we have and use it to our best.
Yeah, your response fascinates me because it reminds me of something that I used to know a long time ago, and I guess have forgotten, and that is that the criticism that I remember when I was in school was they used to talk about, well, when you get out into the real world, you'll know, you'll experience this and thus and so. The idea that education or school is apart from the real world, and what you're suggesting is, for you at least, this year's experience was very much a part of the real world, and integrating the two, working. Do you have an idea of where you're going when you graduate, and has this become part of your education?
It's.
Or are you still looking to?
I'm still looking right now, but it's assumed that I'm going on to college, and I'll be just using the talents that I have developed and that I have just within me. I'm not sure of where I'll be going, but somewhere.
Does everybody who goes to your school or our school, the Maslow-Toffler school, does everybody go to college? I would ask you to respond to that, because I think some people have the notion that alternative schools are either for handicapped people, they're either for people with learning disabilities, or they're for extremely bright people. And I'd like you to react to that too, but does everyone that goes to Maslow-Toffler go to college?
No. I think Maslow just Maslow-Toffler just encourages people to do what they really want to do with their life and to the best of their ability. I chose to go to college, but I know a couple of other people that went to Maslow that didn't choose to go to college. They're going to go on and work, or, you know, help the community, volunteer work, or whatever they want to do. It's just, I feel that it prepared me for the real world better than, say, the traditional high school.
I'd like you to, you know, what do you mean specifically? How do you think?
How did it prepare me,
yes.
you mean?
Yeah, in what way?
Responsibility-wise, like in Maslow-Toffler, you have a certain amount of classes, and if you miss more than 20% of your classes, you don't get credit for the class. In the high school, you can cut, you can miss classes, and the only thing that they do is they call your house, and you can make up work. And I think it's a lot easier to not go to class in the high school than it is in Maslow-Toffler, because if I didn't go to class, I wasn't run after, my teacher didn't call my house, and that nonsense. It was my responsibility, and if it was an English credit that I missed and I needed that class to graduate, and I didn't have 80% attendance, that was my tough luck, and I knew that from the very beginning.
Somebody who's sitting out there now listening to you, what might you say to them if they were considering making a choice for their senior year or their junior year, regardless of the school district that they're in? Some school districts have alternatives, some don't. What might you say to that person if you were going to be giving them some advice for their senior year, let's say?
I would just say for them to choose the program that they think is best and to put in it what they can. And what you put in, you get out of it. If you don't put anything into your senior year, you're not going to get anything out of it. You can't sit back and wait for your teachers to do everything for you or for your other students to grab you by the hand. You have to jump in and grab what you get, what you want.
Does this, you know, the dialogue so far sound like some of the confusion that frequently exists about what alternative schools are in terms of them being all one thing or all the other? I wondered about that a moment ago.
Well, I think these people are helping to clarify it for anybody who might be watching and have the idea that used to be widespread that alternative schools had people swinging from the trees. I think we see here a couple of pretty serious-minded people who have learned to take responsibility for their own educations. And while one thing I did want to say, well, I'm glad to see that they feel no tremendous pressure that everybody in Maslow-Toffler should go to college. Nevertheless, it's important that the figures nationwide for the number of people who go on to school from an alternative school is generally much higher than the average is for the other high schools in the district. Alternative schools typically send a much higher percentage of kids on to college.
That's curious because many people who object to, the people that I've talked to that object to alternatives, object to them on the grounds that what we need now are more attention to the basics, the reading, the writing, and arithmetic, defining basics in that way, and saying that, or believing that alternative schools don't concentrate on that. As you say, they're concerned with things like basket weaving and swinging from the rafters, which is not necessarily true at all. How come you are in the place that you are in these days? I remember we've known one another for quite a while, and your intellectual and academic involvements at Hofstra and on the Eastern Seacoast, as far as philosophers of education are concerned, has in the past been quite different from where you are now. What accounts for your really commitment to exploring alternatives and helping districts explore alternatives using their own resources, as John so eloquently expressed?
Well, I think you're right that it looks like I may have changed my mind a great deal. I don't think I've changed my mind so much. I've changed emphases. And the reason for that is my own view of what constitutes a good education and the kind that I would hope that my child would be involved with has really not changed so very much. But what has changed on my part is the conviction that we can appropriately and advantageously do the same thing for everybody. We've long operated in this country on the assumption that as soon as we found the good way to run education, that it would just be great for everybody, and this is what everybody should get.